Supposing we wanted to place two backgrounds on the page, you would first need to code in your two images. You would not use a second background image property. You would use the existing property. However, you would set a second image. In this case, that second image would be preceded by a comma. So now if I set a second image, I now have two images. However, because they are tiling, you cannot see both of them at once because one goes over the other. So we can see that the first image is on the outside, the second image is obviously behind. If I were to set the background repeat property to no repeat. Now because this property is set to one value, that one value will apply to both of those images. Now we can see that indeed I do have one image on top of the other. If you wanted to use two background properties, you would need to use a background position also in order to place them nicely. The background position property takes two values. The first value is the horizontal. The second value is the vertical. So I will place the first image centered at the top. I will place the second image centered at the bottom. And here you see those two images behind my content. So this is the theory behind using multiple background images. Multiple background images were introduced in CSS3, however, it utilizes the existing CSS properties. We also have a background size prop, and that enables us to change the size of the background should we wish to do so. And this takes two values. If you just use one value, it will apply to both the width and the height. Now you can see that I have drastically increased the size. However, I could use pixels, and now you see I have made it much smaller. Another interesting value for the background size property is contain. What that will do, it will place that image into the container as best possible. And I am using a different image for this. This is a rather large image. It is enabling that image to be placed in the background as best it can in order to accommodate the whole image. Remember, it's placing it inside the body. Therefore, that white space that we see is part of the browser window. It is not part of the body because we don't have a lot of content in the body. If I were to use the cover value, it would stretch it. And if you've ever seen those nice background images that fill up the whole page, this is how they do it. Setting the background size position to the value of cover. If I start resizing my browser, it crops off my image. The image doesn't look all that pretty. I would like to show you a trick that developers use to make that image scale nicely with the browser window. And we rarely set CSS properties to the HTML element. But in this case, I am going to set the height to 100%. And technically, this is representing the browser window. When I scale my window, notice my background scales along with it. It doesn't just crop it off, it scales very nicely. There is also a background clip prop, and it takes one of three values. The border box, which is default, the padding box, or the content box. What the background clip property will do, it will clip the background image depending on where you specify it. So if you look at this image here, by default, the background extends all the way from the edge of the border. That's where it starts. I can set the value to padding box. What that does, it clips the image. It doesn't resize the image. We see there is extra image and that was clipped. We also can clip it to the content box, which makes it smaller. This is the background clip prop. So it clips the image either to the padding or to the content. We also have the background origin property. The background origin property is similar to the background clip. It enables you to say where you want that background with respect to the border, the padding, or the content. However, it does not clip it. It just resizes it. By default, the value of background origin is set to padding box. So that is where it covers. If I wanted it to start covering at the border box, it would just resize the image. Notice it seemed to have gotten a little bigger. If I wanted to make it cover the content box, I can set that value and notice it's a little smaller. It did not clip. They both essentially do the same thing, they only do it a little bit differently.